There exists a particular kind of heartbreak that goes unnoticed by most. The quiet tragedy of children who never had the luxury of being children. These are the little ones who learn to tiptoe around landmines of adult emotion, who discovered that their own tears were inconveniences rather than cause for comfort, and who understood far too early that safety wasn't guaranteed. It had to be earned through perfect behavior and endless accommodation. If you recognize yourself in these words, you already know the weight of invisible burdens. You know what it feels like to apologize for existing, to second-guess every word before it leaves your mouth, and to find yourself perpetually more concerned with everyone else's emotional temperature than your own need for warmth. This isn't a story you chose to write, but it became the narrative that shaped every chapter of your life that followed. Most people can't pinpoint the exact moment their childhood ended, but they remember the feeling, that subtle shift from carefree laughter to careful observation, from spontaneous play to strategic survival. For some, it happened during a particularly volatile argument between parents, when they realized that their small voice could sometimes bring temporary peace. For others, it was the gradual recognition that mommy or daddy needed more comfort than they could provide, yet they tried anyway. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow erosion of innocence, like watching a sandcastle disappear, wave by wave. First, you learn to read the room before entering it. Then you discover which version of yourself keeps the peace. Eventually, you become so skilled at emotional management that adults marvel at your maturity, never suspecting that what they're witnessing isn't wisdom. It's a child's desperate attempt to create stability in an unstable world. When a young mind realizes that chaos can strike without warning, it begins constructing elaborate defense systems. These children become emotional meteorologists, constantly scanning for storms on the horizon. They develop an almost supernatural ability to sense mood shifts, to predict when someone might explode, and to position themselves as human shields between conflict and consequence. This hypervigilance becomes their superpower and their curse. They can walk into a room and immediately assess who needs comfort, who might cause trouble, and how to navigate between both without making waves. They become fluent in the language of unspoken pain, expert translators of adult dysfunction, tiny diplomats negotiating peace treaties in living rooms and kitchens. But this constant state of alertness comes at a cost. Their nervous systems never learn to truly relax, never discover the sweet relief of knowing that someone else is watching the horizon for danger. Even decades later, in perfectly safe environments, their bodies remain coiled like springs, ready to leap into action at the first sign of emotional disturbance. Perhaps the most painful aspect of premature maturity is how it gets celebrated by the very adults who created the need for it. You're so responsible for your age, they say. So independent, so wise beyond your years. Each compliment lands like a small betrayal, confirming that the sacrifice of childhood is not only acceptable but admirable. These children learn to smile at praise that makes them feel emptier inside. They discover that their pain, when transformed into performance, becomes valuable to others. Their ability to suppress their own needs in service of adult comfort gets rewarded with attention, validation, and temporary safety. So they perfect the art of self-erasure, believing that their worth lies in their usefulness rather than their inherent value as human beings. The tragedy is that they become addicted to this dynamic. Years later, as adults, they'll find themselves drawn to relationships and situations where they can replay this familiar script, being needed, being useful, being the one who holds everything together while slowly disappearing inside their own lives. Children who grow up too fast become native speakers of emotional suppression. They learn that tears are weaknesses to be hidden, that anger is a luxury they can't afford, and that joy must be muted lest it draw unwanted attention or accidentally overshadow someone else's pain. They master the art of the diplomatic response, the neutral expression, the careful modulation of their own humanity to match whatever the room requires. This emotional flattening serves them well in chaotic environments, but it becomes a prison in peaceful ones. As adults, they often describe feeling like they're watching their own lives through glass, present but not fully engaged, capable of describing emotions but struggling to actually feel them. They intellectualize their pain instead of experiencing it, analyze their joy instead of inhabiting it. What makes this experience particularly isolating is its invisibility. Unlike other childhood traumas that leave obvious marks, premature responsibility disguises itself as virtue. The child who mediates their parents' fights appears mature. The teenager who works to help support the family seems admirable. The young person who never causes trouble looks like the ideal child. But beneath this facade of competence lies a profound loneliness. The isolation of being the only adult in a child's body, of understanding too much while being too young to process it healthily. They carry secrets and worries that have no business living in young minds, shouldering emotional labor that would challenge someone twice their age. This invisible burden follows them into adulthood, manifesting as chronic anxiety, perfectionism, and an inability to trust that others can handle responsibility without their intervention. They become the friends who never need help, the employees who work extra hours without being asked, the partners who anticipate problems before they arise and solve them before anyone else even notices they exist. The children who grow up too fast develop remarkable capabilities, emotional intelligence that surpasses their peers, crisis management skills that rival trained professionals, and a depth of empathy that allows them to understand suffering in all its forms. These aren't small gifts. They're extraordinary human qualities that can create profound positive impact in the world. Yet these same strengths become obstacles to their own happiness. Their emotional intelligence makes them hypersensitive to others' needs, while remaining blind to their own. Their crisis management skills keep them perpetually waiting for the next emergency. Their deep empathy allows them to hold space for everyone except themselves. The irony is devastating. The very qualities that helped them survive their childhoods become the barriers to thriving in their adult lives. They're like emotional athletes who trained so young and so intensively that they never learned there were other ways to move through the world. Gentler ways, more sustainable ways. Ways that included rest and play and the simple pleasure of being cared for instead of always caring. When love becomes something you earn rather than something you receive, it fundamentally alters your relationship with connection itself. Children who grow up too fast learn that affection is conditional, that safety is temporary, and that the people who are supposed to protect you might instead need protection from you. This creates what psychologists call insecure attachment, a deep uncertainty about your place in other people's lives, combined with a desperate need for connection. As adults, they often find themselves caught in exhausting cycles of pursuing relationship while simultaneously preparing for abandonment, craving intimacy while maintaining emotional distance as protection against inevitable disappointment. They love deeply but conditionally trust. They give generously but struggle to receive. They're experts at making others feel valued while rarely feeling truly valued themselves. In romantic relationships, this often manifests as a pattern of attracting partners who need fixing, recreating the familiar dynamic of being needed rather than simply being loved. Somewhere inside every adult who grew up too fast lives a child who never got their turn, a little person who was told to be quiet when they wanted to sing, to be responsible when they wanted to play, to understand when they needed to be understood. This inner child doesn't disappear. They go into hiding, waiting for a moment when it might finally be safe to emerge. Sometimes you can catch glimpses of this hidden child in unexpected moments, a spontaneous laugh that surprises you with its freedom, a moment of silliness that feels both wonderful and terrifying, a flash of curiosity about something utterly impractical. These moments feel like visits from a stranger, even though that stranger is actually the most authentic part of yourself. The tragedy is that many people spend their entire adult lives keeping this inner child locked away, believing that to let them out would be irresponsible, dangerous, or simply impossible. They've internalized the message that their childlike qualities, their wonder, their playfulness, their natural spontaneity, are luxuries they can't afford or weaknesses they can't reveal. Chronic childhood stress literally rewires the brain, creating neural pathways that prioritize threat detection over joy recognition, problem-solving over play, vigilance over rest. The nervous system of someone who grew up too fast operates like a smoke detector with a hypersensitive battery, constantly scanning for danger even in the safest environments. This manifests in adulthood as an inability to truly relax, a persistent sense that something bad is about to happen, and a physical restlessness that makes stillness feel threatening rather than peaceful. Even during vacations or celebrations, part of them remains on duty, unconsciously monitoring the emotional temperature of everyone around them and preparing to intervene if necessary. The exhaustion that results from this constant vigilance is profound but rarely recognized. It's the fatigue that sleep doesn't cure, the depletion that rest doesn't restore, because their system never fully powers down. They're like computers running background programs they can't see, constantly processing data they don't consciously realize they're collecting. When your sense of self-worth becomes entangled with your utility to others, it creates a fundamental confusion about identity. Who are you when you're not solving someone else's problems? What is your value when you're not being needed? These questions can feel genuinely terrifying to someone whose entire self-concept was built on being helpful, being strong, being the one others could depend on. This identity crisis often emerges most powerfully during life transitions. When children leave home, when careers change, when relationships end, when health issues force rest. Suddenly, the roles that provided meaning and structure disappear, leaving behind a person who may not recognize themselves without a crisis to manage, or a person to care for. The journey toward authentic selfhood requires slowly untangling worth from usefulness, value from performance, identity from function. It means discovering that you exist independent of your contributions, that your presence has value separate from your productivity, that you deserve love not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Perhaps the most unexpected part of healing from premature responsibility is grief. Deep, soul-level mourning for the childhood that was sacrificed, the innocence that was surrendered, the carefree years that were traded for survival skills. This grief often catches people off guard because they've spent so long minimizing their losses, telling themselves they turned out fine, that it wasn't that bad, that others had it worse. But grief is not comparison, it's acknowledgement. It's finally allowing yourself to feel sad about missing out on the luxury of being protected instead of protecting, of being guided instead of guiding, of making mistakes without fear of catastrophic consequences. It's mourning the version of yourself that might have existed if you'd been allowed to grow at your own pace, in your own time, with appropriate support and age-appropriate responsibilities. This grief is not self-pity or weakness, it's recognition. It's your adult self finally validating your child's self's experience, saying, yes, that was too much. Yes, you deserved better. Yes, what you lost was real and significant. This validation becomes the foundation for healing, because you cannot heal what you cannot acknowledge, and you cannot reclaim what you refuse to grieve. Healing from premature responsibility is not about becoming weak or irresponsible. It's about learning that strength doesn't require rigidity, that responsibility doesn't demand self-sacrifice, that caring for others is possible without abandoning yourself. It's discovering that there are forms of power that don't involve control, ways of helping that don't require self-erasure, methods of loving that nourish rather than deplete. This softening process happens gradually, in small moments of allowing, rather than controlling, receiving rather than giving, being rather than doing. It might start with something as simple as letting someone else pick the restaurant, asking for help with a small task, or admitting that you don't know something instead of pretending expertise. Each act of softening feels both liberating and terrifying, like learning to walk without armor you've worn for so long you forgot it wasn't part of your body. The vulnerability feels dangerous because historically it was, but slowly, with practice and patience, you begin to discover that softness in safe relationships actually creates more security than hardness ever could. True maturity, it turns out, is not the premature strength forced upon children by circumstance, but the conscious choice made by adults to take responsibility for their own healing, while treating themselves with the compassion they deserved but never received. It's the wisdom to know when to be strong, and when to be soft, when to help, and when to step back, when to solve, and when to simply witness. Real maturity includes the ability to disappoint others in service of your own well-being, to prioritize your needs without guilt, to say no without extensive justification, to be imperfect without shame. It's the freedom to be appropriately selfish, reasonably demanding, and unapologetically human in all your beautiful, messy complexity. The goal of healing is not to eliminate the strengths developed through early responsibility, your emotional intelligence, your resilience, your capacity for deep empathy. These remain gifts, hard-won treasures that can bring tremendous value to your life and relationships. The goal is integration, keeping what serves you while releasing what constrains you. Integration means using your crisis management skills when there's an actual crisis, not manufacturing emergencies to feel useful. It means employing your emotional intelligence to understand others while also turning that same attention toward your own needs. It means offering your empathy as a choice rather than a compulsion, a gift rather than a reflex. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this healing journey is how it impacts others. When someone who grew up too fast finally learns to treat themselves with gentleness, they give permission for others to do the same. Their willingness to be imperfect creates safety for others' imperfections. Their choice to prioritize their own needs models healthy boundaries for everyone around them. Children, especially, benefit from witnessing adults who have learned the difference between responsibility and over-responsibility, between caring and caretaking, between strength and self-abandonment. They see that it's possible to be capable without being controlling, helpful without being self-sacrificing, mature without being rigid. Healing from premature responsibility is not a destination but a practice, not a problem to solve but a way of being to cultivate. There will be days when the old patterns resurface, when you catch yourself trying to manage everyone's emotions or apologizing for needs you have every right to express. This is not failure, it's humanity. The difference is that now you have awareness, and awareness creates choice. You can notice the old reflex and choose differently. You can catch yourself mid-performance and remember that your worth doesn't depend on your ability to keep everyone comfortable. You can feel the familiar urge to fix and instead choose to simply witness, to trust that others can handle their own experiences without your intervention. Your story, the painful, beautiful, complex story of growing up too fast, is not just your burden to bear, but also your gift to offer. Your deep understanding of pain makes you uniquely qualified to recognize it in others. Your hard-won wisdom about survival makes your insights about healing particularly valuable. Your journey from premature strength to authentic maturity creates a roadmap for others walking similar paths. The child who learned to read emotions like a survival manual becomes the adult who can teach others about emotional intelligence. The young person who carried weight too heavy for their age becomes the mentor who helps others learn to share their loads appropriately. The little one who never got to play becomes the grown-up who creates safe spaces for joy, spontaneity, and wonder. If these words have found you, if they've stirred something in your chest that feels like recognition mixed with grief, mixed with hope, then perhaps this is your invitation to begin again. Not to start over, because your history is part of your strength, but to start differently. To approach your life with the gentleness you wished for as a child, the patience you needed but never received, the unconditional acceptance that was your birthright but somehow got lost along the way. You can begin treating yourself as someone worthy of care, rather than someone who must earn it. You can start asking what you need instead of only noticing what others require. You can practice saying, "I don't know, I need help, I'm tired, and that's not my responsibility," without shame or extensive justification. The child you once were, curious, playful, deserving of protection and care, is still alive inside you, waiting not for perfection but for permission. Permission to be seen, to be heard, to be held without having to hold everyone else first. That child has been waiting patiently, hopefully, trustingly for you to remember that being strong doesn't mean being alone, that growing up doesn't require giving up wonder, that taking care of others is beautiful, but taking care of yourself is necessary. The journey back to yourself won't erase what you've been through, but it can transform what those experiences mean. Your early responsibility doesn't have to define your entire life. It can simply be the difficult beginning of a story that gets more beautiful, more authentic, more truly mature as it unfolds. The strength that once was born from necessity can become strength chosen from wisdom, offered from abundance rather than demanded by scarcity. You grew up too fast once, now you have the rest of your life to grow up again, this time in your own way, at your own pace, with all the tenderness and patience and unconditional love that you deserved from the very beginning.